Alrighty, welcome to the front row forward analysis pod for the SC Hub. My name's Munster Mash, and today we've got Realm and the Myth. How's it going, guys?
Not too bad, not too bad. Happy to be here. Happy to take a back seat off the hosting like I've done previously and just kind of chill out a little bit,
Yeah, had a big off season, ready to rip and tear.
Oh, yeah. Always a big off season, always studying, always getting my rando gear and using inspiration for the stats. Yeah, it's been good fun.
How about yourself, Myth?
Yeah, doing pretty well. Excited to be here. Glad that we've got the most exciting position in Supercoach to go over today as well.
I think there's a few things for us to talk about. So, we'll get stuck into it. We're going to have these pods running fairly regularly through the preseason, I should say. So I guess we'll touch a little bit on NRL news. There's not really been anything over the last few days since the hooker pod. Anything you guys want to bring up?
No, honestly, nothing too crazy to mention. I think Ricky Stewart's talked a little bit about his early Raiders side, but nothing really concrete as we expect from him. There's nothing that comes to mind.
Yeah, the only thing I've seen is the usual PR videos this time of day, like this sort of time of year. So I guess, we'll just get stuck right into the front row forward stuff then. So
Beautiful.
I want to cover a little bit about strategy first, and I'll go over what I'm thinking for Supercoach, and then we'll go into you guys. So this year, there is going to be a lot of mid-ranges in other positions, as we all know. It's like second row forwards in particular is looking like it's going to be midi central this year. So because of that, I think there's going to be lots of trading done in other positions. So because of that, I'm thinking I might try to lock in two guns, or a gun and a semi-gun to begin with, to avoid trading in front row forward. What do you guys think?
What price range are you looking at for gun and semi-gun? Like, not talking players just yet, but how much are you willing to spend on that position?
Well, at the moment, I'm looking at Payne Haas and probably either Ruben Cotter or Jack de Belin.
Okay. So those higher priced mids, that sub-gun category where they're not going to be those premium guys, but they're a guy that you're hoping will give you a 60, maybe 65 average over the first 12 rounds, and you don't have to look at them.
Exactly right. And the one thing that I really learned last year was that third front row forward spot at the end of the year, if you can get somebody that's just going to knock out 55 to 60, is probably a duel that you don't need to play, but as a backup, is probably all you need. Like, everyone held on to Max King for longer than they maybe wanted to, but he did the job. So I'm thinking that somebody like, a Ruben Cotter, Jack de Belin, can fill that role for me, and I just don't touch them all year. What about you guys? What are you thinking that you'll do with front row forward?
Yeah, Myth, you want to take this one to start?
First of all, I do like the thinking there. The last 2 years, actually. 2 years ago, I held IPAP and Max King from the very start of the season to all the way through. And had a great year.
Yeah.
The last year, I started with Tarpany. It wasn't the best starting pick, but across the season, didn't have to trade him out. Didn't have to do anything with him. I had one spot locked down from start to finish, and that was very useful. So I had a decent year last year too. So I do like the strategy of locking someone in. I think there's a lot to consider with how much you want to pay up in front row forward. Yeah. I don't want to trade there. You're right. I don't want to spend trades there early. There are higher upside positions to do it. But to not trade there, you've got to lock in the cash. So it depends where you're willing to sacrifice. I'm not committed to any particular strategy right now. Gun and mid is probably where I'm leaning. But if a good cheapie comes through that I can feel confident can just give me a 40-45 for the first maybe 4 or 5 rounds and that's it, then I'm interested in that at front row forward too as well. If I'm doing that strategy, I'm definitely pairing with the gun though.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
You're of the same thinking realm?
Yeah, about the same. I'm probably leaning more towards mid at the moment. I've had Payne Haas pretty much in my side the entire preseason up until maybe 2 days ago, and then I've sort of come back down to that mid just because there's a few that have now really caught my eye. And I really like the cash that I can spend elsewhere on that higher upside positioning. So looking, I can upgrade the second 5'8". I can get a better first center wing, upgrade one of my mid 2RFs to a gun 2RF. There's a lot I can do with that money that I know Payne Haas I'll probably have up until at the very least Origin or even hold throughout the whole season. But the points I could get early on and make the cash a front row could it work out better for me?
Yeah, sounds good. All right, so I think it's probably best if we start on what I think will be the template front row forward for pretty much everyone, and that is Payne Haas, Flegler, Lenu, and Hughes.
If you'd like, I can pull up the percentages. I've got the ownership percentages here.
Yeah.
So
yes, please. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so Haas is the highest owned at about 35%. Second up's Viliami for feeder, but he's front row, second row dual, so he's most likely just a placeholder on people's teams in the second row, front row. He's about 25%. Then we got Sam Hughes from the Dogs at almost 25% as well, with all the talk from in the preseason about him training the house down. Then, like I said, Flegler, he's 22%, so he's the highest owned mid, and then Spencer Leniu at 20%. Then we got a bit of a drop off to the Cotters and Tinos and a couple of other mid ranges.
Yeah. So, do you guys agree that this is sort of the general sentiment that most people should be aiming for? Like,
I guess it depends where you're sacrificing elsewhere or where you're making up. If you're not running the two guns, or if you are running the two mids, like where are you using that cash elsewhere, or where else are you sacrificing for it? So, for your team example, where are you cutting, or where do you have cheaper compared to the template team to get those two gun front rows?
Yeah, exactly, and that's. I hope I get a better answer during preseason. I'll give it that way. So anyway, I guess we'll discuss why these guys are template for anybody that's, I guess, newer to Supercoach. Payne Haas, look, the stats speak for themselves. He'll probably be the highest averaging front row forward, maybe. Well, I mean, look, Tino will give him a good run for his money, but I think those two guys will probably be 1 and 2. Payne has generally started strong over the last few years, and look, he's looking like it's potentially going to be another big year for him.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
I think with every gun, you've got to really ask yourself 2 questions. First one is, why will they score lower than they did last year? And when you come to Payne Haas, it's hard to answer that question because he had very little attacking stats. He's a young player still. He's still on the up. His role's not going to change. Kevy's worked it out with him. That typical play the first half, play the first 10 of the second half, and then come back on that last 10, 15, where he's often quite explosive. So that's probably, and it worked for the Broncos. They got to the grand final. Yeah. It was successful. So it's hard to find a reason why Payne Haas will decline. And then you go to the second question, why will this guy improve? In 1 try.
Yeah.
He had a try assist. He had a try for Australia. He might, from memory, might have had a try in one of the finals games. There is scope to improve. He has similar attacking stats the year before, but I think anyone who's watching Payne Haas can go, there is potential there for upside. But
and correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was also starting to develop a little bit of an offload towards the end of the year.
He's always had an offload. He just needs to get the license, I reckon.
Yeah, I think we might see that a bit more this year with the Broncos.
But I am going to throw out something a little controversial. I do think he's being overhyped a little bit compared to the other gun front rows. I think both Tino and AFB as well are probably being slightly underrated. Both come with more risks, but I've just got AFB for a moment. I've got his stats from last year in front of me. Obviously, new coach started last year, was working out the rotations, right? Anthony Blake across the first 7 rounds last year played between 45 and 55 minutes. He actually had 4 games under 50 minutes.
Ooh.
From round 8 onwards, he did not have a single game below 54 minutes, and a large part of them are 60 in the mid-60s minutes range. So he had lower scores to start the season, so you could arguably say he's underpriced. Is his role going to change? Obviously, the risk with him is that contract situation, but that's one risk, and he's got upside. He's got
See,
more.
the problem I have with AFB is the try scoring. Like last year, he scored 8 or 9 tries. How often does a front rower replicate that?
Yeah, that's a risk as well.
Yeah. However, we have seen from
change.
Yeah, and we've seen from Adam Fanua-Blake as well at Manly that he doesn't mind scoring a try. So I'd still back him probably for at least 5 this year.
It's a simple thing of Payne Haas is very safe. And front row forward is often a position you don't want to take a risk. So it's go with Haas. You know you're going to not have concerns with him. But if you decide that front row forward's where you want to take a chance on a guy going on an attacking run early, both Tino and AFB, if we're sitting here after round 6 and one of them scored 4 tries, are we really going to be that surprised?
Yeah, and no Origin as well. So he's going to be playing the whole year. Whereas Tino and Payne Haas both out.
All season, if he doesn't do anything different, you don't have to stress about him. You don't have to worry about him. If he replicates last year.
Yeah, that's the big if. So I guess that brings us to the third big name front row forward, and that's Tino. So he was number 1 for last year. Look, some of his scores were frankly ridiculous, but there is the new coach at the Titans. So how much does that affect him? It's what do you guys think will happen?
Yeah, it's a real unknown with Tino because he has been the number 1 point scoring front row the last 2 years, I believe. He had the total points for the position 2 years running. And he actually scored the exact same amount of points the last 2 years, but played like 3 or 4 less games in 2023 from memory. So his average just went astronomical. He's another one, the try scoring that kind of scares me with him. Same as AFB. He scored he had a run of 4 games in a row where he scored a try each of those games towards the back end of the year after teams had basically given up and the Titans just have fun and they put on 40 points a game. AJ Brimson's dropping tons left, right, and center. So that's what kind of scares me for Tino, as well as the second round bye. Like I know it's the early draw, the early buys. It might not be a huge problem, especially if you have enough depth, but that's the one thing really enticing about Payne Haas. He doesn't have a bye until the major buys, I believe, or about round 10, somewhere around there. So you have him the whole way through. No bye before Origin. Yeah, that's a huge reason as to why I personally prefer Payne Haas over getting a gun in over Tino. But then on the flip side, he's got the duel. He does have that lull in the middle of the year where he's out for Origin, might play reduced minutes. Desi might mess around with the rotations there a fair bit, but that back end of the year is where Tino shines, and he'll probably average 90 for the last 7 or 8 rounds.
Yeah. All right. I can't argue with that, to be honest. I will think that everyone will want to finish probably with Payne Haas and Tino, most likely. But look, we'll see if somebody else spikes with form and maybe, takes one of those spots. So I guess we can start now talking about those guys that are probably just a slight bit under, in my opinion, those main 3. And I guess who most people would say is number 4 is probably Tarpany.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yep. I think, in my opinion, Tarpany, he's so dependent on Ricky. And you need 2 things to go right for Tarpany. You need Ricky to give him the minutes, and then you need the form. Usually the form's okay, but the minutes at the start of the year, when we've seen for a couple of years now where he hasn't got it. Yeah. I mean, he still started last year, right? I think he had like his first 8 scores or 6 scores, whatever, between 57 and 67. So he didn't let you down. And if you pick him, he won't let you down. Especially he's a little bit lower price this year, I think, than when he started last year. Just a few points lower for his average. He's someone you can hold all season. He's probably not going to let you down. I think he's just almost very similar to Payne Haas, just you're expecting 10 to 15 points less a week. So if you want that, it's not a bad pick.
Yeah, for me, I think he's shown over the last few years that he starts slow or slower generally. So I'd be probably looking to pick him up maybe closer to Origin. Like if we can find, say, a mid-ranger that raised in price, or you can upgrade, like jump in from like, say, like a Flegler if he's not killing it, to a Tarpany. I think that could be really good, but that's where I would sort of peg him.
Yeah, I'd be looking to either find a bit more extra cash to go up to one of those 3 guys we spoke about earlier, or I'd be looking to cut some cash and try and see if you can find a guy 100k cheaper that's going to dish out that 60-65 to start the season that we probably expect Harpany to do.
Yeah, I have Tarpany and AFB around. Like AFB's definitely a better Supercoach option and a better player in my opinion, but I have him and Tarpany in the same kind of order, as in I would put them in the category of a buy at Origin, just because they're not playing Origin, so they're the perfect people to have through that buy period. That's just my mindset on them personally. So they're not two that I would look to start. If I'm starting with a gun front row, it's going to be Payne Haas or Tino, and those other two are my targets for Origin time.
Yeah.
Can't knock it.
So, look, is it like, what other front row forwards are you guys looking at for your own teams that you'd like to have a chat about?
Let you go
Myth,
first.
you want to take that one? You want me to go first? Yeah, I was talking to Munster Mash about this just before. I've got a list of about 5 or 6 front rowers that I've basically finalised on, and they're the 6 that I'm going to pick out of. And crazily enough, Tino didn't really make that shortlist for me just because of that second round bye. It's just too much of a headache to deal with. I won't have enough depth in that time, I don't think, just because I don't think we're going to get the cheapies we want across the board. So I will probably have to look to make some cuts somewhere. So if I am going to start with a gun front row, it is going to be Payne Haas. To me, he's one of the best players in the game, the best prop in the world. He always starts strong, majority of the time. The last couple of years, the first round 1 to 10, he's had a 75 average, a 70 average, and 76. And in 2021, I think he missed the first 5 rounds anyway. But those other 3 years, from round 1 to round 5 or 6, he had almost an 80 average every single year. So he does start a lot stronger than he finishes. So he would be someone I'd look to start with and then potentially flick around Origin time to one of those other guys we mentioned before.
Yeah.
Other guys on my shortlist that I'm pretty keen on, they're more of the mid-rangey type. Max King at the Dogs, that pack is absolutely terrible. He's fighting for minutes with the likes of Ryan Sutton, Liam Knight. Like he's going to have plenty of minutes there, and he's at a bit of a discount as well, just because last year he had 3 games that were injury affected. So based on the 20 games he played that weren't really injury affected, he's about 4 points undervalued. But as well as that, he should be getting damn near 60 minutes a game. So hopefully he gets back to around a 60-65 average that he got early last year. So he's the kind of the main guy I'm looking at who's behind Payne Haas. So he's the kind of next up gun that I'm predicting there.
Yeah.
Then I've got Ruben Cotter for obvious reasons. His weapon just needs the minutes. Kind of the same as Tarpany. His minutes are never reliable, but his work rate is. So just going to hope that he gets those minutes if I do go him. He's one that's a bit of a riskier start, so he's towards the bottom on my short list, to be honest. Then the one we mentioned already, Thomas Flegler, he should be the leader of the pack. He has a lot more opportunities now, potentially a lot more minutes, and hopefully Wayne just gets the best out of him. The guy that's basically been in my side the entire preseason, Terrell May. This is assuming he gets the starting spot at the Chooks. He's just an absolute PPM weapon. If he gets 45, 50 minutes a game, he will be a top 4. He'll be up there with the Afanor Blakes and Haases of the world, in my opinion. He's just an absolute freak of nature. One that's a bit more of a pod pick is Hame Sele. Just there's rumours of him potentially getting the 13 role, or at least a dominant position in the Dragons pecking order. And, he wants to be at the club. If he gets that opportunity, he could come out and surprise some people. So he's the last guy on my shortlist that I'm a pretty big fan of.
Yeah, look, I like a lot of names on that list. I guess we'll run through a few of them. First of all, this is my opinion, with Max King, I need to see trials only because I think Josh Curran might end up getting the 13 role.
Yep.
So I want to see how the minutes look for that. If he is still getting 60 minutes, I think he's a really solid pick. I'm afraid, though, he might drop to something like 55. But look, it's a wait and see for me. But the other name that I really like is Cotter. I'm really strongly looking at him as well. And I think he's a little bit representative of how the Cowboys went last year, in that if they're doing well, it's because he's doing well. So it's a very symbiotic relationship, I think. And I'm backing the Cowboys to bounce back. So I think Cotter could be in for a good one.
Yeah, one thing that just worries me about Cotter is that even in 2022, when the Cowboys had that flyer of a year, he didn't even average 60 then. So it's going to take a lot for him and like a consistent role for him to get above that 60 average. That's the one thing I'm just not sure that's on the cards. That's the one thing scaring me off him.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit to see at the Cowboys. I know a few people will be interested in Jason Taumalolo as well, because sort of we want to see how it looks. Yeah, I prefer Connor, personally.
Taumalolo, I think, is a guy that is really shouldn't be on the lips of too many super coaches at the moment, right? I think eye test more than statistics is what we need to go off for Taumalolo.
Yeah,
if we see him in that trial, he's busting tackles and he looks like the Taumalolo of old, then forget the numbers last year and back your eye test. If you think he looks good, take a flyer on him. If he doesn't, and he looks like that, unfortunately, more aging Taumalolo that we've seen in the past couple of years, then probably he's an avoid, regardless of whether you think the numbers look like he's well undervalued. I think for this position, if you're going in mid, you need to sit down and go, what am I looking for here? Am I looking to get a guy that's priced at 40, 45 that's going to give me 50, 55 and that's just going to plug a roll for the part of it? Or are you looking for a mid that you think can make that jump up? If you can find one that you think the downside is them averaging that 50, 55 and the upside is them being a keeper, which is where I think Cotter probably fits into. He's got that potential. Then that's where I think you can get that extra boost. But there's also nothing wrong with going. I found a guy at 35 averaging last year. He's going to get 50 this year. That'll do it front row forward too for the first 8 rounds. Absolutely.
Yeah. A linked player to the gun, basically.
Yeah. Pick something pick a player for a particular reason. I think one that was mentioned there and one that's getting around quite a lot is Flegler.
Yeah.
And I can see why people are interested. You're going from being the third main middle to the Dolphins, where he's probably going to be one of the leaders of the pack. If it's not Gilbert, it's probably Flegler. But at the same time, his PPM's been between 1 and 1.1 every year. His minutes have been around 45 every year. So he's definitely going to be more of a link guy. If you're picking him expecting that he can make a jump up to 65 average, he's not getting 65 minutes.
No, I agree with that. I don't think he's getting there.
If you pick him going, he's going to get 50 to 55, he'll get me 50 to 55 points, then I'll do for the first 8 rounds, then you're probably getting that more likely than not, I'd say.
Yeah, that's where I see him. I think he's, if people are thinking that he's going to be that like gun sort of front rower, I think he's definitely, if that's your expectation, he's a trap. I just think there's way too many middles at the Dolphins. We know Wayne loves Mark Nichols. You've still got Jared Wallace. They're not going to suddenly reduce the minutes of Jesse Bromwich. It looks like
I don't think they'll have much of a choice. Like Bromwich is aging. Nichols has come out. I think this is his last year. He's retiring at the end of the season. Like that pack is aging. It's going to be the Gilbert and Flegler show, in my opinion. Like it's going to be down to them to really carry them forward. And that will help out other positions. Like I know that we talked about it last week with Jeremy Marshall-King, but that whole team could explode back off the back of the likes of Tom Gilbert and Tom Flegler.
Yeah, and I'm expecting that probably by about round 8, I think we'll see Tom Gilbert be the big minute player. I think he'll be the one that gets 60 plus.
I really think it's going to be Gilbert. 59 minutes on average last year.
Yeah.
I don't see why that's going to change. There's 180 minutes left in the middle, if we assume that stays the same.
Yep.
Does Flegler get a third of those when there's Bromwich, Kenny probably spend some time in the middle. You've got Nichols in there, maybe Ray Stone. I think the big issue, the big barrier to the minutes for Flegler is the fact that they'll have an edge on the bench that's not a pure edge. It'll be that Kenny Bromwich that'll spend some time on the edge, spend some time on the middle. And I think you want him starting. If you see Kafusi and Lemalelu as the starters with Kenny Bromwich just on the bench, there's a fair chance those two edge back rollers just go 80. And
I think just to start the year, Lemuelu is coming back from an injury or surgery he had in the offseason, so there's a chance he's not playing early rounds.
And that's the same with Gilbert as well. He's coming back from an injury, so I think he would be reduced minutes to begin with. But then, throughout the year, I think he'll build it up, and I think you'll see. I think Flegler will be about the same as what he got minutes-wise at the Broncos.
which was only 45.
Yeah. So, slight trap in my opinion.
I think he's slight trap if you want a gun. If you're thinking he's going to get a slight uptick in minutes and he'll outperform his value, then I think that's okay.
That's it. He won't be going down. Like, he's not going to lose you any cash, but there's a decent chance he might not make any.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's us now starting to talk about some mid-rangers. So, does anybody else have... You mentioned Hame Sele. So, that brings me back to my, I guess, rogue name of Jack de Belin to a degree. I think there's a big opportunity for minutes in the Dragons pack. I'm expecting the three middles to start to be Jack de Belin,
Blake
Hame
Laurie.
Sele, and Blake Laurie. I think they'll be the starting three.
That's what I got as well.
If you think of it roughly, I think they kind of line up with Paul Gallen, Andrew Fafita, and Matt Pryor. They were the middles at the Sharks. And I think
they don't compare to Blake Laurie, though. He's a future Origin prop.
Well, he did say that just the other day that he wants to play Origin. So, look, I always like hearing that in preseason because it means somebody's ready for a big one or they want to at least put in the effort for it. So I think one of them, I mean, Hame Sele is the safe pick out of those if you're looking for a mid-ranger. I think he's a really good pick. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see like Jack de Belin maybe getting 65 minutes. So, and I think he can probably go at about 1 point per minute with the way that that Shane Flanagan likes to play. So that's why I'm looking at him. But look, it might be Blake Laurie, it might be Hame Sele. I think that one of those is going to be a really good pick to begin the year.
Yeah, when you get a 100k discount or 150k discount if you go and Sele, so that's why I'm leaning towards him. But your point on Jack de Belin, he points per minute, he's always going to be that 0.8 to 1. He had a few games where he played 80 minutes and he'd get around that 0.7, 0.6, but if he's getting 0.7 on an 80-minute game, he's dropping almost 60 points anyway. If he's playing that lock role and he's getting 70-plus minutes, then he could be a huge pick, especially with the duel. But, there's rumours of Hame Sele getting the 13, if not like a prime position in that front row. There's definitely a world where he's out getting 40, 45-plus minutes, and he's shown even last year there's some games where he had some crazy good PPM in games without any attack. Like there's games where he was getting 1.4 in PPM, 1.26, 1.63, 1.37, and that's with minutes between like 25 to 40. So if he's pushing that up to 45 a game, he could be a potential 50-plus average player.
Yeah, I like it.
There's another one guy I'm going to throw out there. This guy's definitely a bit more punty, and it's actually someone in the chat, John Smith's, any love for Manly front row forward. And that's one of the guys I'm going to bring up briefly, Taniela Paseka.
Paseka, yeah, he's a weapon.
Yeah.
He really started to come on last year, and I think more than a statistical point of view here, I think it's more an eye test one. He really looked like he was starting to become that player that I think a lot of people think he can be. I think he's got potential to break out. Mm-hmm. He had 54 average last year, which is a little bit impacted by injury in the last game. So 58 if you take that game out. Between, I think, round 7 and 20, before the game he got injured, he did not score under 50. All the scores are between 50 and 70. Didn't score a single try. And he's the type of front row forward that could easily have an AFB type year where he scores 8 tries. It'd be a lot, but he's got the game to have that potential. He is a punt because you probably need some attacking stats, and you probably need him to keep getting those minutes. I wouldn't think they're going to drop because outside of Turbo, that Manly middle looks pretty rubbish as well. So you think
really you do have Lodge coming back early rounds.
Yeah. They've got Sipley, but that's I think that's it for middles.
He's 26. He's reaching that age where he starts.
They got Matt Lodge coming back in the early rounds. Yeah, Matt Lodge could take some minutes.
He might, but I don't think so after last year. I think Paseka could be that alpha prop. Look, again, it's a punt. I think it's a time of the season to be looking into these guys. When we get a week or two out, revert back to what you're thinking, revert back to your basics, look where you're taking your risks. It's probably not going to be at front row, but if you're making a decision, you want that mid-ranger that you want to maybe back the eye test for. I think he's an interesting one. Put it that way.
Yeah, I like it. I actually, as a real out of the box that not many people would be thinking of punt.
I don't hate it. I mean, he's a great player.
Yeah,
Might be more of a draft pick, but
yeah, but even then, like for somebody, if you're pairing somebody in that sort of price range with Payne Haas,
it's a lot of cash.
It's a lot of cash, but it's solid. Like it's for somebody like me who's not looking to spend trades. It's tempting.
Yep.
It's tempting. Anyway, we'll quickly answer. We've had a couple of questions here in the chat. So, first of all, Ploughboy, they are empty growlers from my local breweries here in Brisbane. Unfortunately, empty on my top shelf there, as people might see. Yeah, unfortunately empty. John, as you've just heard from us, we have a bit of love for some Manly front row forwards. And I guess then we'll go to the other question I've got here is anybody looking at Leniu for front row forward 2? I'm going to say here, no chance.
No chance at all.
However, as you hinted at, Rome, if we get Terrell May starting at front row forward, that I'd be very keen on.
Yeah, he's just an absolute freak of nature when he's playing. He showed it in Cup, like he had games where he was at over 1.5 ppm, big minutes. Last year, when he got that role, like the decent minute role, I think last 4 rounds, he played, I think he averaged about 40 minutes. His PPM in that period is 1.5, 1.3, over 2, and then 1.3 as well. And I think the only time he got a try was in that one where it was over 2 ppm. And in the finals, he was debatably their best player, their go-to prop. So I think with that, he takes that confidence into the new year. Robbo's got that confidence in him that he can show up when needs be. So he should be starting and he should be getting decent minutes, but it's just whether or not he actually will.
Yeah, he's a monster. He was very, very impressive towards the back end of last season and across the finals. I think he's a hard one to ignore if he does get that starting spot because his PPM is there. He has shown he can maintain it over longer minutes, and he is cheap. And it's very hard to go past him if he gets that starting spot. But I think the question is, could you gamble him if he's off the bench?
Maybe. It depends, because if it's, say, Warrior Hargreaves that's the starting prop, who might only play 35, and he's still getting those 45 minutes, I'm not against it. But it would only be Jared.
I don't know if I'm backing Leniu as a big minute player. Like I know he's come out in the preseason and said that he wants to be the starter and he wants to play like more minutes, but I just don't know if he'll have that in him or if Robbo will trust him with that as a newbie to the team, where he's got the guys like JWH, Collins, and Terrell May have been around and have shown that they can do it for the club. So I think Leniu is going to start off at the bench. If he ever makes the starters, then I don't think that's going to affect May. I think that'll be him more taking over the Warrior Hargreaves role. But again, Collins isn't going to lose that starting spot. He's the representative front rower for the club. He's not going to lose it. So yeah, I don't think Leniu's going to be that big minute player. JWH is probably in his last year at the club. I can't see him playing huge minutes anymore. He might have the odd game where he hits 60 minutes when they lose 2 or 3 minutes like they always do. But yeah, it should be Terrell May starting. I've got to back him in.
They've signed him for a reason, though. He said he's wanted to be that alpha prop. I actually think Leniu is probably a fair chance of starting, which is why I bring up that May question, because we are speculating at the moment, and I guess we've got to consider both sides of the coin. As May starts, he's very appealing. If he's on the bench, then it's raising some question marks. It's taking a risk in front row forward. If we get past round 1 and you've got him and he plays 30 minutes for some reason, Robbo's preferring the other guys, then immediately you've got to fire at FRF2, which is not where you want to fire to start the season. Back to that question, though, that same thing I think applies for John Smith's question. Leniu at front row forward 2, I see it far too risky that he is a fire scoring 35 to 40 points, even with, what was it last year? He had 32 minutes for an average of 33 points.
Yeah, even if he starts, there's no guarantee he's playing more than 30 minutes.
Even if he does play 40 minutes, if that PPM has dropped over 30 minutes and he's only doing a PPM of 1 over 40, even at that price, having a 40-point scorer on field every week, even early, is a problem. So I think he's an FRF3 discussion. I don't think he's worth the risk at second front row forward.
I agree.
100K
One more point I should make with May as well is that he's got that contract offer from the Dogs, and the
Yeah.
May brothers have come out and said they want to play all together. Apparently, the Dogs today have offered Talon May a contract for 2025 onwards as well, and said they're willing to take Terrell and Talon. So there's potential there that they both sign with the Dogs from next year onwards.
I'm
in
not
that
sure. I'm not sure if they're enough of a utility player to sign for the Dogs, though.
case. Yeah, too big of a name.
But how does that affect May's role at the Roosters? Does Robbo get pissed off and give him a dodgy role? Or does he go, May's the best front row forward we have after Collins, so we need to give him minutes?
Well, let's run him into the ground, try and win a premiership, and then piss him off injured.
Yeah,
Another option.
wait and see. Wait and see.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Oh, yeah. For me, I would just say if you're looking for players in that sort of 300 to 400 mark, I think you probably need two of them so that you can, like, if you've got a buy, that you're not really struggling to play too cheapy, like a cheapie as your backup front row forward. I think you've got to have probably at least, say a gun and two at least semi-decent options. Like I'd personally not feel comfortable getting a 40 if I can avoid it. So are there any other mid-ranges or even going into cheapies that I guess you guys are really looking at?
Yeah, there's two cheapies that I really have my heart set on. They've been my two cheapies, my front row 3 and 4 for the entire preseason, essentially, and that's Xavier Willison from the Broncos. I think he gets a decent bench role at the very least. He's been basically waiting his turn at the Broncos front row rotation for a couple of years now. He's had some big raps on him for as long as I can remember talking about his name. And I think he finally gets that crack this year. So front row forward 3 at 260K, I think he perfectly slots in there. Assuming he gets the decent enough minutes and gets a 35-40 mark as my front row forward 3, I'm happy to have him there. And the other one that I like the look of is Sam Hughes. I talked about it before. Phil Gould, Jacob Carras have both given him massive raps as basically the next Jacob Preston for the Dogs this year. The guy that's been killing it in the preseason, and that will likely get a decent role just based off his work rate. So yeah, and those Bulldogs middles are terrible. Like Ryan Sutton, Liam Knight. He's not got much competition to work for.
Yeah, I agree with those sentiments pretty much. I think Sam Hughes is going to be in almost every team because there's just no other cheapies really at that price in front row forward. With Xavier Willison, the only name I think that's really going to offer him any competition, I guess, for the Flegler minutes is Fletcher Baker, who they recruited from the Roosters. So I think he's not a bad shout in that sort of 300 to 400K mark. If he can get those 45, 50 minutes, I think he can go about I believe he goes at about 1 ppm per minute. So yeah, not the worst name. I think there's better options. But what was that? Sorry?
More like 1.2 for Willison. So if he does get minutes, I wouldn't expect him at 40, but even if he gets 30 at 1.2, he's going to do enough to make a bit of money. Yeah.
So before when I said 35-40, I meant points, not minutes. So yeah, I do expect him to be around that 25 to 30 minute mark, especially to start off with. I expect Jensen to be the partner with Haas to start, and then off the bench there's either Baker to Powell, Willison, and Hetherington to take those minutes from the middles. I just think with the reps Willison has, he should be a decent option, especially at his price.
He has had reps on him for a few years.
I'll quickly circle back because I think there's a little bit to talk about with the cheapies, but you mentioned earlier when looking at those 350, 400, those lowercase mids, if you're going to pair them with each other. I think another option, if you don't want to spend that much in your front row forward, is just make sure you've got an exit strategy.
Yeah.
Like if you're taking a risk in your front row forward, your second front row forward, for example, and you don't have a dual, that's when you might consider a Viliami for feeder at front row forward 4 to have that dual as that exit strategy. Say you take a punt on a Tyson Frizzell at second row forward, for example, or you've got a Wong, or you've got one of these mid-ranges, a Curran, and immediately you see front row forward is a problem. You've got that cash to just make one trade to then get on the best mid at front row forward. Just making sure where you're taking a risk, you've got a way to get out of it if it clearly goes belly up round 1 or 2. Everyone's going to have a fire in the first 3 or 4 rounds.
Yeah.
The people that clean up that fire quickly are the ones that you will usually get ahead.
Yeah, the people who start with limited fires as well. As after round 1, they're not having all of their positions having an issue, like I was last year.
Taking Alex Johnson and Xavier Coates were the names of those fires, weren't they?
Yeah, it's two of many.
All right, I guess, yeah, we've covered, I would say, the majority of the targets. Of course, there's going to be 1 or 2 that have slipped through our fingers of who we're going to talk about. So just before we finish up and start to really wrap it up, is there any final names that you guys would like to chat about? Or what the other thing I'd like to say is opportunities at teams. So as I mentioned earlier, I think there's an opportunity at the Dragons. I don't know what yet. I don't know who specifically. Do you see any other teams where there's that opportunity?
I do. I think there's another cheapie that needs to be thrown into the mix there, and I actually think we're going to have a bit of a tough decision picking our front row forward cheapies this year, and that's because of Liam Henry.
You were going to say Liam Henry.
Yeah.
He was the next name I was going to say as a potential another cheapie option.
So if we look at his 2 games from last year, 20 minutes for 22 points, take in mind that was consisted of 21 tackles. So it's hard to view that if that's his work rate, no runs, so no opportunity to tackle bust, no opportunity to offloads. That was tackle PPM, basically. A tackle PPM of 1, it's impressive. The other game, 25 minutes for 36 points. All in base plus power. I had a couple tackle busts in there. We know how good Panthers are with their juniors. There is a spot there for a front row forward. So if you look at their structure that they've run recently, there's been a hooker on the bench, and that's been a job share. There's been an edge back rower on the bench, and that's been a job share. Garner's come on for the last 20 minutes to replace Hosking or Sorensen or something like that, which means you've only got 2 forwards on the bench that are middles. One of them is probably going to be Lindsay Smith.
Yep.
And the other spot is up for grabs. And if it's Liam Henry, the Penrith front row forwards are JFH and Leota, who average 50 and 40 minutes. That means it's 70 minutes for those bench middles, assuming Yo goes the distance.
Yeah, so last year their rotation was JFH on for 50, then Lenu plays the rest of his minutes basically, and then Leota and Lindsay Smith basically shared the rest of the 80 minutes. So are we expecting Liam Henry to take exactly what Lenu was playing, or would we expect him to get more minutes and they potentially reduce someone else?
The benefit with someone like this is you want those cows at front row forward. You're not upgrading them in round 5. You're not cashing them out in round 5. You're cashing them out in round 10, in round 12, over the origin period. And this is that spot, that front row forward bench spot for Penrith is going to slowly get minutes. They're going to work them in. When a team is as dominant as Penrith, they can take Yo off for the last 10 and give the young fella an extra 10 minutes. They can flood him that way. He gets those opportunities in a stable footy side, in a competitive footy side, that is going to get that opportunity. That player, whoever that is going to get opportunity. They're going to have potentially a spike game. If one HAI in that middle pack and he could get 40 or 50. If he goes to that PPM, there's a 60-pointer and that starts that cash gen rolling. Whether he competes up against Willison and Hughes, that is the big question.
Well, that was my next question. I was going to say that assuming they all get the roles that we're assuming, they're all making the bench. The front rows is what we expect. They've got the 2 starters and one other bench prop to compete with. Which 2 of the 3 are you taking?
I'd personally go Hughes, and I actually think I'd probably, out of those 3, I'd take Henry. Because I think his role is a little bit more secure, and only because there's a little bit of a less of a log jam at Penrith compared to the Broncos.
Yeah, that's fair.
The upside of Willison is he's got try scoring potential. As I just said, you're not looking for your front row forward to peak early, but out of those 3, Willison's the guy that could put together 2 or 3 rounds together where he scores tries. All of a sudden, he is 400k by round 7 or round 8.
Yeah,
you can cash.
I don't see Willison as a bench player for the rest of this season. I think he starts off the bench, but he's been touted as Payne Haas's partner in crime for however many years. They're building him up to be that starter alongside Haas and Carrigan. Corey Jensen and Fletcher Baker are not going to be the future Bronco starters. Like I see that happening early doors with Corey Jensen just because of how good he's been defensively, but I just can't see that long term. So I think Willison will grow into that role and then eventually take over Jensen's spot.
Yeah, fair chance. He's a big boy and he looks powerful. He's
He reminds me of Tino a bit. The way it reminds me more.
Yeah,
like he's got that
that's
Tino
a good shout. That's a good shout.
Yeah.
And picking two of these three, if they're all named on the bench round one, I think it's going to be difficult, but I actually think they could all be pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing we will not recommend is do not take all three.
No. Unless one gets dual before the start of the season, then maybe.
Yeah. So the only other thing I'll just put out there, I know that we've sort of got that we have to take best 13, but I know that Penrith are playing round 13, the first bye. So if you need somebody just to get to that, maybe that 14 or 15, and you've just held like a Henry for that long, I think that's not the worst.
Especially when Yo is going to be in Origin.
Exactly. If this doesn't turn out, do not hold it against me. Anyway,
a lot can happen between now and round one, let alone between now and round 13.
Yeah, exactly right. And then some, and then some. So I think that pretty much wraps us up for front row forward.
Yeah, I'm happy with all that. I'm happy we didn't talk about Liam Knight because I don't like talking about much of the Dogs pack.
No. It's
no Ryan Sutton, no Liam Knight.
I think I do not mention Ryan Sutton. He was my pod of last year, and he is dead to me forever. Forever.
That Doggies pack could rotate like anything.
Yeah.
Who knows? They could play 50 minutes one week, 20 the next. I
don't think Serrano knows.
No, that's why everyone's got the appeal of Sam Hughes, because he could start on the bench, and then round two he could be starting playing 50 minutes.
Yeah, look at where Max King started. Like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just on the topic of Liam Knight, he does love an injury. He likes to like a niggle. He's had quite a few over the last few years when he was at the Bunnies, so we will see.
Yeah, he does love playing mediocre as well.
Same time, he was the name on everyone's lips a few seasons ago when he was touted as a very good mid-ranger, and that obviously didn't pan out. And after a few years of playing this game, the amount of times I've seen a pick like that then come out one year and just kill it, you never know.
Never know. And I will be the first one to trade him in if he kills it. Well, maybe. We'll see. Anyway, I think that just about wraps us up. Do we have any further questions from the chat? I can't see any.
John Smith's brought up Nelson Asafa-Solomona, hearing that he's been training on the edge. Is this good or bad? And if Nelson Asafa-Solomona spends significant time on the edge, which I don't suspect he will, especially with the signing of Blore, but if he does, he's explosive. He can get attacking stats, and I think his appeal goes up.
Oh, I completely agree. I am a Storm fan. Don't hold that against me. So I have watched a fair bit of Nelson over the last few years. He tends to really gravitate towards that second row role when there's injuries. So he really went into that role when Katoa was injured. That was when he really shone. And I think, especially with the return of Pappenhausen, that they will be looking to get him into that front row barge over role. So I think that's where his position will be for the quick play of the ball and for Harry Grant to try to get him over. So I think he'll be in front row forward to try to give that explosive, I guess, power that the Storm have probably missed last year for sure.
Well, they just have no front row forwards. Like they've got Blore, Katoa, Howarth, Loyero for their second rower, but I don't know why they even need to put him there with the lack of middles that they have. Like they are desperate for Nass to be in the middle, surely. Otherwise, it's Kamikamica, Welch, and Aaron Penne or Alec McDonald. And I'm pretty sure they're trying to ship Aaron Penne off to England.
Yeah, there is Josh King, who generally gets quite big minutes. They do like his work rate down in Melbourne. Not that it necessarily translates to Supercoach. So I would imagine that the starting props will probably be Welsh and Kamikamitha, and then probably King at lock with Nelson off the bench. That's how I see it.
Yeah, it's just whether Nelson comes off the bench or Kamika comes off the bench, really. And it's, I don't think it's going to.
I think they'll rotate. I really do think they'll rotate throughout the year, and you'll probably find, so for me, because of that rotation, is where I don't like it. But if he does get a second row role regularly, where he's getting big minutes, I think you have to consider it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Nailed it.
All right. I think that covers us all. So the next podcast is going to be, I believe, on Sunday again with Scoop and a few others. I'm not 100% certain of the names, but that's, we'll see. They'll be covering second row, I believe. So I think it may be a long one.
It might have to be split into a double.
It might be that we have to split it up. So I wouldn't be surprised if we are potentially covering a bit of second row, but we'll confirm what will be on next week. Obviously, like and subscribe. If you haven't joined the SC Hub on Discord, jump in. There's always a good chat. It's been going non-stop since Supercoach opened. It's sometimes hard to keep up with it, but I mean, lots of fun getting stuck in and having a few chats with people. Thank you very much for joining me this week. I know, Myth, you'll be fairly regular with me on Wednesdays. I think that's about it.
Beautiful. Love your work.
All right. No
Thanks,
worries.
guys.
No doubt you'll speak to you soon, and we'll have made about 1,000 changes to our Supercoach teams at that point.
Yeah, I'll have William Knight in by then.
I hope not.
It's not even the worst start I would have had.
No.
All right.
Thanks,
We'll
everyone.
see you next time. See ya.